All right, everybody, we're here with my father again, Mike McGann. So we're going to talk about the 310P, the 1969 310P. So after it was purchased, 2003, 2004, we'll talk about some cool things that happened there flying the airplane. So what do you got to start off with there?
Well, we started off on my first flight after I got it, took possession of the airplane, and we went up and flew it, and yeah, it flew perfect and everything. All the instruments and everything were checked out okay, and got it back. I'm actually I never did get an instructor in that, but I already had my instrument rating, so it really didn't matter.
How did it feel compared to the 55 310?
Well, one of the things about it was the wing lockers. That really was great. Another key thing about it compared to the 55 and the Baron for that matter was the room on the inside, the space you had to be able to get into the back of the airplane while you're flying it and all that. It had many advantages, and I wrote an article for the Twin Cessna Flyers, but one of the great things about the 310 was the fact that it was a good short field airplane in the sense, and the reason it was a good short field airplane was because it was about 8 inches higher off the runway when you were landing than compared to the Baron, so it would settle down and make a quick landing. And it was relatively easier to fly in that way. The other thing about it is that it had good controls and single engine performance, and that was a good thing.
Well, what about the 55 310 flying it compared to the 69? Like, actually, did it when you got into the 69, having not flown a 310 for 20 years?
Well, it
Feel much different?
felt comfortable. I mean, I think both airplanes flew very similar. They both had the same kind of tail configuration, and wingtip tanks on them, so they're pretty much the same in that respect. The newer 310, of course, had 6 seats in it and was a little bit wider, and a lot of other improvements. All the improvements that the Cessna made over the years on their twin were accumulated in the P model before they did the R model.
And
So,
what about yaw?
well, this one didn't hardly have any yaw because it did have a little bit of a surface on the, underneath, and
Yeah, it has the skag on it.
yeah, skag on it. So it wasn't that much yaw in it, and very well, good flying airplane, and also in turbulence it handled really well too. And probably due to the fact that it had weight on the wingtips and so forth, so that tend to soften out the knocking around by turbulence. And so,
All right, so after your little instruction flight, then what do you got going?
well, then we flew it all in lots of trips up to San Juans and back and forth. This picture here is we flew up, I think this was to Arlington, and brought 2 little motor scooters, and then I could put those on board, and they had a lot of room. They folded up and everything. So we would run around. We'd go up to Roach Harbor and Friday Harbor and the Lopez Island and all that, and for the first 6 months or so, and then we eventually I wanted to upgrade the instruments. The original instrument panel looked like this here, and it had the Collins radios in it, but it did have a light strike instrument, which I really like in any airplane.
Yeah,
Keeps
strike
out of
finder.
thunderstorms, yeah. And so then I spent a bunch of money and wanted to upgrade it to GPSs and all that, and I did this at the Aurora Airport down in Oregon, and we installed this CNX 80, which in my opinion is the best GPS that ever been developed, and they were developed by Apollo down in Salem. And it's the kind of thing, it's a button run thing, so in turbulence you don't have to worry about touching the screen and all that. Then on the right of that is an MX20, which is a chart plotter, and it showed great, the chart plotter. And later on I upgraded it even further to add a S model transponder so that I could receive location of other airplanes in the area, which would show up on that chart plotter, give you a good idea of what's going on. And then I've added the engine monitors here. Well, it won't goes away, but anyway. And so I could keep track of all the cylinder temperatures and so forth. It was a great flying airplane, and with those radios, I felt very comfortable going anywhere with it. I've flown it IFR through all kinds of thunderstorms, and the lightning strike finder was keep me out of the bad stuff. And so time goes on, and then I think our Jeff and I we took our first trip in that 310 to Oshkosh, and we flew there and spent the 3 or 4 days in the North 40, camped out and all that, and then came back to Galveston and with Jeff and his little son at the time, and we hung out on the beach and then loaded up after a couple of days on the beach in Galveston with our family down there, and then flew on through St. John's, Arizona, and then into Reno.
I remember St. John's, it was pretty hot flying out of there. That was a real hot takeoff.
Yeah, it was 105 degrees, and we were filled up full of fuel, so we were pretty close to gross. The field was about 4,000 foot east-west, and we took off. The FBO said, maybe you shouldn't be taking off in this temperature, but we said, we're going to do it. 310 can handle it. We got in there, and we got off the ground. It wasn't a high climb in the town, but we cleared all the buildings and made it on into Reno, and then on into home. And it was a great trip to Oshkosh, and then and we had a lot of fun. And so then, from then on, we flew into McMinnville. I didn't have a picture, but we flew to McMinnville. Charlene and my wife did, and where they have
the Spruce Goose.
Yeah, the Spruce Goose in there and a bunch of old airplanes. It's a great museum that worth visiting.
All right, Dad. So here's a few pictures of when you were in McMinnville.
Yeah, we flew to McMinnville to the museum down there, and this is one of the airplanes that's in the same building that the Spruce Goose is in. And see if I can bring that up.
Spitfire.
Yeah, and oh wait a minute here.
Messerschmitt.
There it is. Yeah, the Spruce Goose, which is, you could go inside there and see how that thing is running. It's just absolutely fascinating. I saw it for the first time when it was located in California, and they trucked it up here, I think back in about 2001 or something like that, put it in a museum in there. It's just a fascinating thing to get inside. If you get a chance to get down to McMinnville, Oregon, don't want to miss this
built
one.
out of wood, the whole thing.
Yeah, built out of wood. Got back in the Second World War when aluminum was getting scarce, and they needed it for the fighter planes. So that's that one. And yeah.
So then after that, you were.
Well, for the rest of that year, we flew to Center River and all over the place. And then in 2004, again, it was just flying around the Northwest and all that until we got to our next trip to Oshkosh, which which occurs in July and August. And we flew into Miles City and Oshkosh and so forth, and then to Las Vegas, and then on into Oxford, California, where we met.
Well, and we had an issue with Nellis Air Force Base.
I don't want to remember that part.
Well, that was when we were going into California, coming from the east. We were, en route, and the air traffic controller, they were really busy at the time, really busy, and we had flight following.
Yeah, I was going into Vegas.
Going into right.
Vegas, and I called up sort of control, and they didn't answer back, and I'm flying in and getting ready to land in Vegas, and they never called back, and I ended up in the military air base space, and so finally got a hold of the military controller, and I got a code number so I could go back into the other space, and I finally got hold of the center there in Vegas, and they cleared me out of there. But after I landed, they said, "Say, we want you to call the controller of the military. They're out to get you." So I called up the military base after we'd landed, and they said to me, "Oh, Charles, well, he's off duty right now, so just forget about it." So that was the end of that, thank goodness.
Oh, geez,
didn't want to end up in Area 51 and catch all those UFOs and stuff. And so so anyway, it was a great year, and going into Oxnard was kind of fun too, because that was the first time I'd been into Oxnard in California, and we were headed in there, and there was a jet airplane sitting on the runway, and wanted to get clearance to land there, and they said, "Well, you got to wait for that jet to take off." So we had to kind of circle around for a while.
I had to do a go around.
Yeah, do a go around, and they finally cleared it off. And we landed there in Oxnard, and spent some time on the beach in California, and so then that was just the last major trip we did that year. And let me see. Yeah.
Well, then the probably the last thing you had in '04 was when you flew down to do the Colorado River.
Oh yeah, that happened in 2004, and we were lucky we got a permit to do the Colorado River, and we had a private group that was going to do the river, and so I loaded up the airplane with all my rafting gear stuff and flew down via Reno and Flagstaff and unloaded the gear and spent the next 3.5 weeks on the Colorado River. And it was a great trip, and then we came back and loaded up the plane and came home for a great year flying and boating.
Now, when you just one last thing, when you were flying down to Colorado, didn't you get in some dicey weather, and you guys were trying to get on top or something, and you had to go down and do some?
Oh well, we were coming down, just got into Oregon, and I was on an IFR trip, and I was at about 8,000 feet, and when I got into Oregon to go to the Pacific Mountains, the minimum altitude was 10,000. Well, I started to try to climb to 10,000, and I was getting such a downdraft over the Cascade Mountains that the airplane wouldn't make it. I couldn't make altitude. I was actually sinking at about 200 feet a minute. I had to call control up and say cancel my IFR, and I had to do scud running all the way down into Reno. And when I got down into Reno, there was so much wind there, crosswind to the main airport there. I asked them to allow me to make a landing at the east-west runway instead of the north-south runway, which was a lot shorter because it was going into the wind, and there was a big fire raging in one of the neighborhoods there. I could see the smoke blowing away. So they allowed me to cross-land the main runway, and we spent the night there, and then on down into to Colorado.
Interesting, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's funny how the wind was blowing. The first time I've ever had to make a landing in such a wind that was going across the main runway where all the jets were landing in Vegas.
Wow. So what was it? Just a real small, short little runway, probably just for that reason, huh?
No, well it was at least 4,000 feet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's no big deal.
Right.
For the 310, I landed in the first maybe 600 feet.
Yeah, okay. You had a big time headwind.
Turn off before it crossed the main runway.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So that was a good year, and that L310 is a
best. No, we loved it. It's a fantastic airplane for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Dad. We'll get on back here for a few more years here when we can.
Okay.
So, thanks, everybody.
Standing by.
Okay, right, final approach, going full flaps. 90 indicated.